ידיד נפש, אב הרחמן, אב הרחמן. משוך עבדך אל רצונך, אל רצונך. ידיד נפש, אב הרחמן, אב הרחמן. משוך עבדך אל רצונך, אל רצונך. ירוץ עבדך כמו היד, ישתחווה מול דרך. ירוץ עבדך כמו היד, ישתחווה מול דרך. ידיד נפש, אב הרחמן, אב הרחמן. משוך עבדך אל רצונך, אל רצונך.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi Nickerson.
How are you this evening, Cantor?
I am well, Joel. It's great to be with you, as always.
It's good to be with you. It's good to be with you. You know, we started a new month this week in the Jewish calendar, the month of Av, and this is a special Shabbat. It's not the most uplifting of Shabbatot in our calendar. This one is actually called Shabbat Chazon, the Shabbat of Vision. It's the Shabbat that we have right before Tisha B'Av, which we are going to be commemorating next week. And it is based on a passage from Isaiah. And really the idea is, unfortunately, to get us in a mood of contemplation and reflection about loss and mourning, because that's what Tisha B'Av is all about. But at the same time, it has this idea built into it of vision. And so my hope this Shabbat, not only for myself, but for anyone who is watching tonight, is really to take this opportunity as a Shabbat of reflection, not only to focus on those mournful elements of our own lives and in the world in which we're living right now, but also a message of hope, because the Shabbat that we're going to have next week is Shabbat Nachamu, the Shabbat of comfort. And so even though we are supposed to, this Shabbat, prepare ourselves for the mourning that comes with Tisha B'Av, we also have to be looking towards comfort. And so that's what I'm sitting with this Shabbat, is this tension that seems to be existing in our lives and in the world right now between mourning, but also that need for hope and the need for comfort. And I think Shabbat is a perfect place for us to look for that hope and that comfort, especially during times like these. And the best way to start that off is by lighting candles to light up the darkness, right?
Absolutely.
And to differentiate between the darkness of the week and the light and the levity that can come with Shabbat. So let's continue with candles and Kiddush and Motzi.
Let's all join together, each and every one of you in your own homes, as we chant the blessing for the lighting of the Shabbat candles. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. Now we raise our Kiddush cups. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu b'shabbat kodsho v'ahava uvratzon inchilanu zikaron lemase v'reishit ihu yom techila lemikrae kodesh Seichel Yitziat Mitzrayim Ibanu v'acharta V'yotanu kidashta Mikol ha'amim V'shabbat kodshecha V'ahava u'v'ratzon in Kaltanu, Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat. Amen.
L'chaim.
And now we join in the Motzi. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
Te'avon. By the way, Cantor Gurney, when you said the motzi, it just reminds me of one of these little teaching things that we can teach those who are not Hebrew speakers. Sometimes people say, okay, let's do the hamotzi.
Right.
And what they don't know is that ha means the. So when you say the hamotzi, you're saying the motzi. So either say, let's do hamotzi, or you can say, let's do the motzi. So a little bit of teaching based on the motzi right there.
It's a small but really important thing, right? And it's good to know what the Hebrew means. Yeah. So do that, everyone. We continue now with our Friday night liturgy by singing one of the Psalms. This next Psalm, Psalm 92, was written sometime between the 6th and 8th centuries BCE, and it's known as the Shabbat Psalm. And it says, Tov lehodot ladonai, it is good to give thanks to God, ulzamer leshimcha elyon, and to praise God on high. Two fundamental elements in all of our prayers, to give gratitude to God and to sing God's praises. So let's all join now in this beautiful setting of Psalm 92, Tov lehodot.
Tov lehodot l'Adonai, Tov lehodot l'Adonai, uzamer לשמחה עליון, טוב להודות לך להגיד בבוקר חסדך ואמונך בלילות אמונך בלילות טוב טוב להודות לאדוני טוב להודות לאדוני טוב להודות לאדוני וזמר וזמר לשמך עליון טוב טוב להודות לאדוני.
And now let's all join in this beautiful poem for Shabbat, Lecha Dodi, bride and bridegroom, God and Shabbat.
לך דודי לקראת קהלה, הנה שבת נקבלה. 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 שמור וזכור בדיבור אחד, השמיענו אל המיוחד. אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשם ותפארת ולתהילה. לך דודי לקראת קהלה, הנה שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קהלה, הנה שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה, כי היא מקור הברכה. מראש מקדם נסוכה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לך דודי לקראת קהלה, הנה שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קהלה, הנה שבת נקבלה. בואי ושלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצהלה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה. בואי חלה, לך דודי לקראת קהלה, הנה שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קהלה, הנה שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קהלה, הנה שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קהלה, הנה שבת נקבלה.
We continue now with Baruch Hu, our call to prayer. And as we talked about at the beginning of this service, this idea of vision, this idea of what does it mean to stand up for what matters to you. And so just as we're thinking about visions for the future, this is also a time to think about what you want to stand up for this Shabbat and in this coming week. What are the things that move you, that inspire you? What are the things that bring you comfort and solace in difficult times? And with those concepts in mind, we continue with Baruch Hu, our call to prayer, to say, I am ready not only to enter Shabbat, but I am ready to stand up.
La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La
We continue now with Shema and Ve'ahavta, another little teaching, just like we taught about Motzi earlier, that Shema and Ve'ahavta are actually part of the same prayer. So even though sometimes we like to separate them, they're actually two sections of what is technically called the Shema prayer. So sometimes it's much easier in the world to try to divide things up, but in fact, sometimes the beauty is found when you can bring things together and realize that there's an overlap, that there's a mixing and a melding of values and of traditions all together as one. And so Shema and Ve'ahavta go together as a package deal. So we'll continue both with Shema and then followed immediately with Ve'ahavta.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Vaed Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha B'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol meodecha V'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha b'beitecha u'b'lechtecha b'derech ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני, אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני, Adonai Elohechem.
Cantor Gurney, do you remember your time in Carpinteria? I know it must feel like years ago. You were just there a week and a half ago, right?
It's true. A week tomorrow that we've been back. And as you intimated, yeah, it seems like a long time ago.
I guess I was thinking about it because Michamocha is next, and this idea, you're at the sea, but also as you're talking about this idea of passage of time, supposedly that took place thousands of years ago, and yet every day we mention it. So it's supposed to feel close, so that even though time can sometimes either feel very short or very long, there are certain things that we're supposed to be reminded of and reminding ourselves of regularly. And freedom is one of those things, that no matter how slow or fast the day or the week or the year seems to be going, that you can't lose sight of this idea that freedom is possible and can be in your grasp, so that Carpinteria can still be with you, as far away as it may seem. Hold it close to you, please, Cantor Gurney.
Well, we were on the shores of the sea, right, at the beach. So that was one physical reminder. And I think you hit on a very important point. We sing the Michamocha every single day of the week, several times a day, right? In the morning and in the evening, not just on Shabbat. So every day throughout the year, we are to remind ourselves of that journey from enslavement to freedom. So it's with us all the time, not just on Passover, where we retell the story, not on those Shabbatot when we chant those sections from the Torah, but every single day, as we do now on Shabbat.
Mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha netar ba'kodesh, Torah tehilot, osefel, malchutecha ra'u vanecha, okei hayam nifnei Moshe u'Miriam, malchutecha ra'u vanecha, okei hayam nifnei Moshe u'Miriam, lay 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 lay. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Seri anu ve'amru Adonai lo le'olam le'olam va'ed. La la la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la la la.
We were talking before Michamocha about how time can stand still. Sometimes it can go quickly, and there are only 24 hours in the day. Unfortunately, I feel like another number that was significant this week for our state was the fact that we surpassed 400,000 COVID cases in the state of California. And for me, as I'm thinking about this next prayer, Hashkivenu, this idea of a Sukkot Shalom, a shelter of peace, God, please, we need a shelter of peace. And I just hope, I guess my image today is not just a sukkah, even though it looks like I'm sitting in a sukkah right now, but really this idea that maybe the modern sukkah that we need to be focusing on, this modern shelter right now, is one that we should be putting over our mouths and our noses every single time we leave the house, which is a mask, right? That Hashkivenu is about making sure that we take the steps necessary to not only protect ourselves, but to protect the world in which we live, and that we ask God to help us on that journey. But God is not going to do it for us, right? As we're leading closer and closer towards the High Holidays is about a relationship between God and people. It's not about God just creating miracles for us. And so this Shabbat, I'm really hoping that as we sing Hashkivenu, that all of us can really think about that one of the most basic ways in which we can help to create a Sukkot Shalom right now is to protect one another by wearing a mask and staying safe and protecting our own homes and the homes of everyone else in our city.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, l'shalom. Ve'amidenu malkeinu l'chaim. Ufros aleinu sukkot shlomecha, ufros aleinu sukkot shlomecha.
שפתי תפתח, ופי יגיד תהילתך.
Adonai, open my lips so my mouth may declare your glory. We're moving into the Amidah. We're going to do it silently this evening. But let's keep those words in mind. How can we articulate our feelings? How can we articulate them to God? How can we find the words to express our feelings, not only of pain and mourning, but also those of a vision of a more peaceful and a more healthy future? We're going to move now into the Mishaberach prayer. First, we asked for Sukkot Shalom for our whole community, and one of the most important ways we can do that is to offer prayers of healing for those in need. I feel like the longer that this pandemic is going on, the closer it's getting to all of us, even those of us who live in West LA. We are struck by it, and not only are there people out there who are suffering from COVID-19 and everything that comes with it, but of course there are all the other things that continue to plague our world, both physically and emotionally. And so Misha Berach tonight is our chance to send prayers of healing to all those in need of strength, of support. And we pray for healing, for support systems to exist around all of those who need our help and who need healing.
Mishaberach avotenu mekol habracha avotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Mishaberach imotenu lekol habracha avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
We've reached the final book of the Torah, the book of Deuteronomy. It starts this Shabbat. And you have to imagine the kind of questions that must have been running through the Israelites' minds as they stood there on the edge of the promised land. How are we going to govern ourselves? What are our lives going to look like in this new landscape and in this new environment? And that gets me thinking about the question we are probably all asking ourselves, at least I'm asking myself. What is the world going to look like eventually post-COVID-19? Or if I like to think of it more like the year 1 AC, the year 1 after COVID. Now I think is the time for us to be doing a lot of reflecting, and also, of course, as the theme of the Shabbat, thinking about our vision for the future. What's our individual promised land look like after this pandemic? What's it going to be What's going to be that moment that is going to allow you to feel as though you are transitioning into that promised land? Is it going to be when there's a vaccine? Is it going to be when life seems to be going back to normal, whatever that means to you? Is it going to be when children are all in school in the way that they were in school before this whole thing? Is it going to be when other issues that exist in our country, such as racial justice and economic downturns, when those things change and when those turn around? Is that going to be the moment where you feel like we've reached the promised land? But unfortunately, I think we can almost get too caught up in our individual visions of what that promised land is like. And there may be a point where we have to take what we're hoping for ourselves and tone that down a little for the hopes and aspirations of our entire community. For example, I just read this week a disturbing study that seems to indicate that if we were to have a vaccine right now, 50% of the people would not feel comfortable taking that vaccine against COVID-19. That's a lot of people. How are we going to move into a promised land as a society if so many people aren't even willing to take a vaccine? So this is the challenge that I think we're facing right now, and one that comes up in this Torah portion and throughout the book of Deuteronomy, because the book of Deuteronomy, there is no more journeying. We finished that last week at the end of the book of Numbers. All of the book of Deuteronomy is us standing on the edge of the promised land and Moses talking to us about a values-based approach to how we are going to live our lives, how we are going to treat one another, and how we are going to engage in building a new life for ourselves once we enter into that promised land. And that's basically what we have to be doing right now. Yes, on an individual basis, we have to be thinking, what is that moment where I am going to feel like we are making progress? Because there are a lot of different ideas out there, probably within your own family. There are a variety of perspectives on this. We need to be talking about that. We need to be sharing with one another those moments of hope that we're looking towards, that promised land. And at the same time, we have a lot of work to do as a society and as a country to think about what does it mean for us to have a collective understanding of what that promised land can look like. Because if a lot of people aren't willing to do certain things like have a vaccine or wear masks, etc., we're going to have a much harder time being able to enter into that promised land as a collective. And Deuteronomy teaches us that we are not entering into the land of Israel as individuals. We are entering as a community. And so I think that's the reason why Deuteronomy begins at the edge of the promised land, and why on this Shabbat, right before Tisha B'Av, we also have this idea of a Shabbat of vision. Because our vision has to blend both our individual goals and the goals of this community. And right now, I think our ultimate goal needs to be the health and welfare of our entire community. And when we can do that, when we can focus on that, then we are going to be able to enter the promised land together as a collective, as a community. And that's my hope on this Shabbat. Just a few announcements before we conclude our service tonight. The first is that Rabbi Nanas is leading a film series, and the next installment of that film series is on July 28th. So I hope that you will join her and participate in this. As we mentioned earlier in the service, next Wednesday night, this upcoming Wednesday on July 29th, we are going to be commemorating Tisha B'Av, the only other 24-hour fast day in our Jewish calendar. At this point, the concept of mourning fresh in our minds, we continue with the Mourner's Kaddish. We begin by commemorating those who have passed away in the past month. Joyce Mullery Clark, Howard Greller, Sion Javaheri, Thomas Klein, Eric Rothenberg, Betty Rudolph, Kent Sherman, Charlie Steineck, Stanley Zimmerman. On this Shabbat, we commemorate the following yahrzeits: Muriel April, Marian Barbanel, Abraham Barshap, Itamar Ben Gera, Carol Berkowitz, Betty Berman, Harry Bodek, Manuel Borenstein, Joseph Brandel, Jonathan Brody, Howard Brown, Florence Koski, Irving Dunner, Jeffrey Dworkin, Edith Fader, David Farr, Rand Feinstein, Barry Freed, Edwin Frischling, Irving Gantz, Art Ginsberg, Gladys Goldberg, Cynthia Gottlieb, Calvin Green, Edward Greer, Leonora Harris, Ronald Heft, Ethel Henningsen, Merle Hilliard, Mort Hockman, Jerry Hodes, Hilda Hoffman, Beverly Howard, Miguel Cahan, Melinda Caish, Ruth Kaplan, Ray Kaufman, Esther Klein, Harry Krakoff, James Levine, Irene Levin, Fernando Lozano Jr., Paul Mandel, Elizabeth Meserve, Henry Miller, Arthur Moore, Aubrey Morris, Ruth Nanis, Lori Nitreba, Melvin Nussbacher, Evelyn Prell, Dennis Rainey, Dean Ralston, David Rosenberg, Judith Rosenfelt, Mikhail Rosenberg, Molly Rykoff-Labens, John Sabat, Musa Sadfar, Mark Schulman, Walter Schwartz, Miriam Shapiro, Jaime Scher, Genevieve Simmons, Muriel Solomon, Vincent Verzi, Nan Warshaw, Zev Weisblum, Irene Grace White, Alfred Wolf, Miriam Wolf, Mordechai Yadigar, Anna Zimmer. We now recite the Mourner's Kaddish together. Yitkadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Be'alma divrach hirutei ve'amlich malchutei. B'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael. Ba'gala uv'izman kari v'imru. Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam olmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shmei d'kudisha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tush b'chata v'nechamata. Da'amiran be'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama Rabbah min shemaya. V'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav. Hu yaseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Thank you for joining us this evening for Shabbat. We're wishing you a Shabbat of vision, of contemplation, of peace, and of love. Of course, Cantor Gurney, was always wonderful to lead with you, so wishing you also a restful Shabbat.
Thank you, Joel. To you and your family as well.
And we'll conclude now with a prayer for peace, because God knows we need that more than anything right now. So with that, we will wish you all a Shabbat Shalom and a weekend of peace.
Oseh shalom, shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen. Oseh shalom, shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen. Hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Amen. ישראל,